Hello, Hubert. Lovely to see you again. How are you?
Hi, Liz. Hi, I'm great. It's great to see you.
Yeah, great. So I know you just come back from IMEC, and how did that go for you?
It went well. That was the second time that we had the neurotech meeting in Europe organized. It's good. It's a nice venue. It's a small group of people, but that makes it easy to connect with everyone. We had good discussions. It's always nice, year after year to see progress and learn a bit also where others are heading. So yeah, I enjoyed.
I've heard a lot of people say great things about it. So, Hubert, um, a little bird told me that you started your career in Philips with CDs and DVDs,
Yeah.
and somehow or other moved into healthcare. I don't know how you've managed to do this, but ended up spinning out a company, I think, Sapiens, with colleagues, and then ultimately, I think that was sold, wasn't it, for about 200 million to
That's
Medtronic?
correct. Yeah, yeah.
How on earth do you go from starting in CDs and DVDs to that? Tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, I also wonder sometimes, but, I mean, my career start at Philips was actually, a funny story because I arrived after my PhD in the middle of a reorganization, and I did not end up on any of the lists, if you like. So,
Did
nobody
nobody
knew.
want you?
Well, they wanted at least I hope they wanted me, but at least nobody knew what to do with me.
Oh,
And I was fortunate that one of my colleagues kind of it gave me the idea of back then that was we're working on CD and DVD technology, and everybody in the industry said it was impossible to do a double layer recordable DVD where you had like twice the amount of data. And well, I was trained as a physicist. I didn't really understand why it was not possible. So basically my first assignment, I dug into it, and together with that colleague, we actually invented how to make it work. And I always like it as an example. So also like how I try to approach things is with a little bit of curiosity. Trying to understand if it makes a sense to you, and maybe not always believe what everybody is to say. And there's a balance, right? Being too stubborn also is not always the wisest thing. But I think I always like to kind of try to find that middle ground. And then after there was a couple of years doing that, and then the CTO of Philips, Henk van Houten, actually offered me to do something new. I was ready to do something new. Consumer electronics was great. It was fast paced, but it's not very purposeful in a sense. And back then, Philips was growing strongly in healthcare, and Hank actually introduced me to the topic of neuromodulation, and I was blown away from day one, really. By realizing how small micro electromagnetic devices can influence the nervous system and thereby basically help people and make such a huge impact. So I feel I was actually very fortunate to be in a position back at that in those days at Philips, to venture into something new. And I never left the field since then. I think medtech is amazing, and especially neuro. I really love the field. So yeah, I feel I'm a lucky guy in that sense.
you are, you are. So you eventually spun out a company, am I correct in that? And then that was ultimately sold, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So I mean, after a couple of years, it became clear that neuromodulation at Philips were really not a very good fit. But we felt we had something valuable in hand, and the external world agreed to that, and we got the approval from management actually to spend some time trying to get it out, find some financing, and we succeeded in that. It was a bumpy ride. Learned a lot from that, but yeah, it gave me the opportunity to take that project out of Philips, build a new company around that, Sapiens. That was a big adventure as well, and I learned a lot from that.
That's incredible. I mean, how do you go from being, starting there to actually spinning out a company? And I know that you sold it for a nice amount of money. I know there was a few of you, but I guess a lot of people at that point might have been tempted to hang up their shoes, enjoy the benefits and move on, but not
Mm.
you. I think you stayed on, didn't you, for the transition and then
Yeah.
ended up founding two different companies in the same year. Tell me about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Indeed, I stayed for the transition, and I really couldn't see myself. I really like this kind of stuff. I think it's an amazing field, and so I was there for the transition. I learned a great deal actually also at Medtronic. I think it's an amazing company. There's so much knowledge in there. That was really a great experience as well. And then, after a couple of years, for me, it was, time to do something new. I was kind of missing the entrepreneurial side of things. And yeah, indeed, yeah, I took two adventures on the same time.
That's
Um,
crazy. Where did those ideas come from? Were they just from your own head or?
one was, the other not. So the one company, Sirius Medical, it's surgical navigation in oncology, breast cancer in specific. I actually met at an innovation event the inventor, Bram Schermers. He was, at that time still at the National Cancer Institute, and they were, trying to figure out, how do we spin out this idea? And I really liked the idea. It was, clearly born from an unmet, clinical need. The technology was very simple, very elegant. So I really felt like I could make a difference and help them out. So I joined Bram in getting that spun off from the National Cancer Institute, and we started that company, supported them with getting the first product approved, still just in time for the MTD, still in Europe, getting first financing and to make sure that was a viable company that could continue further in parallel. And that's more, let's say, my neuromodulation background. My brain in that sense never stops thinking, and together with some of the folks from Sapiens and Medtronic, we were thinking, what else can we do? What next? And that really formed the foundation for what later became Salvia BioElectronics. And I didn't want to choose between the two. And in those early days, they're both like small projects, so you can kind of manage to share your time over the two
Yeah.
opportunities. And of course, over time, as things become bigger, you need to make a choice. And for me, it was always from day one very clear, Salvia I would ultimately choose for, because, that's, I consider it like my brainchild. And that was a clear agreement also with Bram. But yeah, that was, yeah, there were busy
Yeah.
few years, but again, very enjoyable.
So Salvia, I know, is dealing with migraines, and I guess a lot of people underestimate migraines. Just like I think it's the leading cause of disability in people under 50. It costs the global economy about 110 million a year, and that's not even like the impact on those individuals, which is phenomenal. But I guess for those of us lucky enough not to know what having a migraine is really like, can you tell us what is it really like?
I cannot tell from firsthand experience, fortunately. So I also learned this from interactions with patients. And um, m- m- migraine can be, severe migraine attack can be all consuming, and the pain can be absolutely overwhelming. Um, just a bit of sound, a bit of light, even your heartbeat can hurt, and you cannot escape from that either. And so the most used treatment also for these patients, really, when your medication doesn't work, is you lock yourself in a darkened room, and you basically sit through that, and people really feel very miserable. Um, and
Yes,
and
maybe
that's
isolated as well. Isolated and maybe misunderstood.
And that's the thing which I had actually not realized initially until you start, because you have, of course, this view indeed, the headache, the nausea, the locking yourself out, but it's isolation, it's loneliness, it's also people saying that they are disappointed in their body, and again, you have to. These are very young people. Some people, develop their migraines already in their teens or their 20s, and got worse and worse over the years. And severe migraine, can prevent you from completing your education or building a career. Or I've spoken to young women who said, "Well, I actually decided to not have a family because I really don't know how to take care of small kids with these migraines." And that is what really stuck with me the most. That it's not just the pain and those attacks, but it's the fear of the next attack. It's the disappointment. It's also the shame of having the feeling that you're letting others down, because it's invisible also for others. There's if you're
Yeah.
if you broke your arm, it's visible, but there's nothing. So and these people have to deal with that in addition to that, to just the pain. So it is really very tough, I think.
So how does it make you feel perhaps when, you hear people refer to it as, "Oh, it's just a headache." And I don't know if perhaps you've even come across that, um, along the way with investors maybe who just don't realize the impact.
Yeah, I used to say that with investors, actually, I do have the experience that most of them understand that migraine is much more than a headache. I think the impact of the disease is understood. I think it is more in the general public that you hear like, oh, it's just a headache. Take a painkiller. Oh, you have too much stress. Take it easy. And that's really not true. It's also not fair. And migraine is not just a headache. It's a neurological disorder. You are genetically predispositioned for getting that. It's not something that you did wrong as a person. It's just that you have this disorder, and you need to deal with that.
Yeah, and I think you said the standard of care currently tends to be, I think, drugs and Botox. But tell me, you're actually tackling not chronic migraine, it's treatment resistant migraine. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's a crucial distinction. It's important, and I think that also goes back to how our understanding of migraine has evolved over the years. Chronic migraine, by definition, by the textbook, if you like, means that on a monthly basis, you have 15 or more headache days per month, of which 8 with migraine symptoms. So it measures, if you like, the severity in a disease in terms of the number of headache days. But that's not a very accurate measure, because it fluctuates over time. Migraine is not like a constant disease. There are all kinds of factors at play. So one month you could be like chronic migraine, the other month not. And the insight that the scientific community, because we did not invent this, obviously, it's the physicians and the scientific community realizing that, is that a a more accurate description is to look at how many migraine specific treatments have you failed, because that says something about the biology of that individual migraine patient. Like, how difficult is it to treat that particular individual? Did he or she fail on the CGRP inhibitors, or on Botox, which are, as you mentioned, migraine specific medication? And then, yes, maybe one month you have 16 headache days and the other one you had 12, but that's the given. Those drugs are not a solution for you. And as a result of that, you are really at risk that th- migraine progressively becomes worse. It chronifies, health spirals down, disability builds up, and your life becomes harder and harder to live. And that's the group of patients that we want to target. The patients that have tried the available drugs, did not find sufficient relief, and are basically left without a solution.
Good Lord. I didn't even know that people could have that many number of chronic migraines. I mean, What words would these people have used to describe what their life is like to you? Just before we come on and look at like MySalvia.
Some of the things that really uh, stuck with me, and because they were like most eye openings, I've had people who tell me that their life became very small. And what they mean with that is that there's a lot of things that they don't do anymore. They don't dare to do, or they are unable to do. So the things that you and I take for granted, or time with friends, with your kids, in your job, all of that disappears, and the migraine steals from you, and so you are left with very little. And again, these are people that are in the prime of their lives, right? It's not with all
Yeah.
due respect, an 80-year-old person who has lived a life, but some like in your 30s. And that was for me really that you realized that, gee, that is so hard to imagine what that takes away from you, really.
Yeah. So tell me, these people already feel, this population already probably failed, abandoned by the healthcare system at a dead end. How did this technology come about? Was it looking for a solution, or was it always targeted at treatment resistant migraine? Um,
Yeah. So um, let's say the use of neuromodulation for migraine is not new. It's not our invention. Let's say physicians have been experimenting with that for a couple of decades. I think since the late 90s, early 2000s, both with external devices and implantable devices. There is some understanding of the underlying mechanisms and anatomy of the disease, and the nerves implicated in migraine, in the back of the head, in the front of the head. People basically started, to essentially try whether neuromodulation, you're trying to calm those nerves, could help. And the initial studies really, gave some encouraging results. And so really based on those, insights, we took that knowledge and tried to bring it a step forward, and try to take that knowledge and transform it into something that's also a commercially viable therapy, and not, just a science experiment.
yes, and I know when we've previously spoken, you've said that you design, one of the values at Salvia is about patient centricity. You've always designed with the patient at the heart. How does that affect internally? How does that show up in the culture of the company? And how, if at all, does it impact on the people that perhaps you listen to as you're designing, and the people that you bring into the team?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. And indeed, I mean, we put the patient first. That is from day one has been a very important value to the company, to us as a team. And basically, from the early days, we went out and got in contact with patients to first of all listen to their story. Just, not coming with, I have this great technology, but trying to understand, what does this mean, to live with such severe migraines, and what what would a solution mean for you? What should it bring? And I think that understanding is really important to us, because um, obviously, as a company, we want to be successful, and our success is really when we are able to help, these people reclaim their lives after all of these years living with migraines. So that's an ongoing discussion and ongoing dialogue that we've had over the years. And as the insights on our end develop, as we get the first prototypes, first products, and so we've kept that conversation going. So there's always this iterative learning loop back into the team.
So tell me, how does that manifest itself now in the design of MySalvia? So if, let's imagine you're explaining that to somebody who doesn't know anything about it. How does it work?
So the MySalvia system consists of two ultra thin flexible implants that are placed through a small incision, just above the ear, across the target nerves implicated in migraine. And after that surgery, the implant is there, ready when you need it. As a patient, you have a small external, controller, like a, wearable headset, if you like, that magnetically attaches to those implants. And each treatment session, you push the button of the device, turn it on, and that's it. So it's very simple. And the things that were important for us when we were designing that technology was the realization that, again, um, it's severe migraine. We need a powerful treatment, let's say. That's why we went for, an implantable solution. So we are close to the nerves that we need to interact with. But again, these are young patients, 70% or even higher female. So safety, aesthetic appearance, these were non-negotiable. And that really drove the design of the implantable component of our system, and I think led to a device which I believe is, truly a unique device. That there's nothing out there that you can find. It's not a conventional neurostim architecture. The second thing is that um, is again that kind of like that consumer experience that we believe is also important to drive compliance. These are people. They suffer from migraine, but they don't want to be treated like a patient with a clunky looking device. So also that part. So with the external component, we make sure that the device and the solution that we provide can be easily integrated into your life, doesn't interfere with daily activities. It's easy to use, easy to wear, and so on. So that from an experience perspective, also that gives a positive experience to the patient. We give the patient control. They know best when they need treatment, at what time they can use it, and that control is also given in the hands of the patients. And all of that kind of evolved over time as we were having those conversations with patients, but also physicians, obviously.
And how important is that for the patients to be able to have that control?
It's important, and one of the things that we learned is that some of the patient gave back to us that they feel they basically lost control. So we've had patients that were telling us that it's migraine rules my life, because if I wake up with a migraine attack today, I know I have to cancel my meeting with friends, or I can't go to the party, or actually I'm afraid to go to the party because the next day will be horrible. And by giving them something literally in their hand that they can use and that they also feel has a positive benefit, has a positive effect on their migraine, really gives them a sense of control. And I remember also one of our patients from a Belgium study was actually, I had not expected that, but one of the things that she explained also to us was that um, it also gave her something to talk about and to explain to others. And again, that goes to the point of migraine is invisible. And now she had this device, and people, like ask, "Hey, what's an interesting device? What is this? Is it a gadget or whatever?" And then she could explain, "Well, no, I have this, really difficult migraine, and drugs don't work, but this is really helping me." And I actually found it really revealing, also how much confidence that gave to her, that that it was something tangible that she could explain also what it is that she has to deal with.
I want to take a minute to say thank you to our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical device development. With deep scientific and engineering expertise, they help medtech teams crack tough development challenges and make the right calls early, reducing rework, delays, and uncertainty later on. Whether you're navigating uncharted technical territory or racing towards market, TTP brings clarity and real-world judgment to the decisions that shape performance, usability, and manufacturability. By retiring risk early and grounding innovation in real-world constraints, they help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes.
Yeah, because I suppose in a way it's sort of a way of saying to people, look, it's that serious that people are creating a device that
Yes.
actually helps. It's not just a headache.
Correct.
And yeah,
It is exactly, that's the point. Yeah.
gosh, I never thought about that. And I think you got FDA Breakthrough Designation. Congratulations. Um, how has that affected like the relationship with the FDA and the progress that you're making? Like, where are you up to at the moment with the trials?
Yeah. No, the breakthrough device designation is great. It's been a huge benefit for us. We secured it already back in 2020, which was very, very early,
It
even
was.
before we had the Series A financing in. So we had very little in hand. Um, and by having it that early, I think what it really helped us with is that we had an open communication line with the agency. So the ideas that we had, because again we have our, as I explained earlier, our technology is pretty novel. So not everything can be covered with, let's say, a standard testing program. So we had to think that through really in detail. How do we demonstrate the robustness of this? How do we demonstrate safety of that? And by having the BDD, we had this open communication line with the FDA, and so we could really go in detail, discuss the testing protocols, the criteria, and so on. And I think it really helped us a great deal. It gave our R&D team here in Eindhoven also the confidence, like this is the product. If we run these tests and we hit these numbers, we're good. And it really paid off for us. So earlier this year, we submitted our IDE request, to FDA, and we nailed it within 30 days. And that's, I think, it's exceptional. That
That's
doesn't happen.
impressive. Never
Yeah, that
heard of.
doesn't happen a lot. And then especially with such a novel technology. And again, that is because we had these conversations going back and forth, and the team did a marvelous job there. But I think it is really wonderful in the sense that sometimes you have like people that look at the regulators like the police agent or whatever, but they're there to help, right? We have a common goal. Um, Safety, safety, safety. Do no harm to the patient, right? We both want. We play different roles in that, but that's a shared target that we had, and it has been very helpful for us. Yeah,
Thanks for that. And I guess that you've said a few things there about novel devices, and it's making me think about reimbursement and data capture and so on and so on and so on. But I think one of the things that you and I have spoken about before is a lot of people have always thought historically design the product, get the product out there, and then start talking maybe to the physicians and look at reimbursement and so
yeah,
on and look at payers but you've always thought differently about that. So tell me about your thoughts in this area and what you've found and learned. Maybe the
yeah,
hard way.
yeah. No, that's that. I mean, reimbursement is yet a different beast, and it's a difficult one. And that was actually the learning that we had from the previous company, Sapiens, where there was an amazing technology, but it started a bit more from the technology perspective and considered those other things at a bit later stage. And that's really the wrong way around. Absolutely sure about that. Medical devices, it's a regulated environment. Period. You have to deal with that. There's the FDA in US, notified bodies in Europe. You have the various payers that will, basically decide whether or not your technology gets covered. And without coverage, there's not going to be any adoption. So you need to understand that landscape day one. Before you make any sketch, before you do anything, I'm not saying that you need to understand it, let's say, in the fullest of details, but you need to understand, the top level requirements. And if you come with your solution, how could it fit in the system? Does it fit in the existing system, or do you need a new code? Because all of that has implications. Um, and some of those implications may go down to, certain choices that you make in the design of your product or technology, certain choices that you make in your clinical program as you build your evidence. And it is going to be very painful and very expensive if you have to figure it out in a later stage when you have your product in hand and think you're ready, while actually you are not.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, and how is can you give us one practical example of how you've had to change the design or perhaps the process that you've done as a result of that knowledge?
Yeah. So very early on, and it went in our case, the payer considerations also went a little bit hand in hand with some of the safety considerations that we had. But um, ultimately, the design that we opted for, which is a battery-free implant that does not have the risk of a battery ultimately wearing out, having to be replaced, was driven by these kind of considerations. And you basically try to take out unnecessary costs and try to create value in a different way. And that was something that we had very early on the radar. And I remember when we were actually doing our seed round in 2018. You imagine that a long time ago, and basically what we had was it was PowerPoint. We actually got some compliments of some of the investors that we spoke with, that we were kind of thinking things through. They found it refreshing that we kind of started from that end game in mind before moving into product design and the technology aspects of it.
Fantastic. So it sounds like you've already been thinking about that. In terms of like getting real world data evidence, how are you preparing for that? Because that's obviously like a prerequisite, isn't it, for your reimbursement?
Absolutely, absolutely. And um, I mean, step one, of course, is regulatory approval, CE mark, FDA. And we are currently running our clinical studies, for that purpose. But also in those studies, we are taking into account, the considerations of, what is the additional evidence that we need on top of safety and efficacy that will help convince payers. But ultimately, if you want to land those positive coverage decisions, you will need to demonstrate indeed in a real world setting how this generates clinical value, how this generates economic value, and for which, portion of the patients it makes sense for a payer to cover for that. And ultimately, yeah, you build that with your real world evidence. So um, obviously, we are not there yet. We are not yet in
Thinking
the
about it.
market,
I
but
know
we are.
you.
Yeah, we are thinking about this, and I think it's important to plan these things well ahead. Because again, once you are in there, it's hard to change course, and you need to make the right decisions. What we can do already today in the pre-commercial stage is, obviously no real world evidence regarding our solution technology, but we can already make the point of what is this patient population? What is their unmet need? What are, the costs associated to that, so that you make really clear what is the problem that we are addressing, and why should anyone care once we come to the market? Why would physicians care? Why would payers care? So that's of course a piece of the puzzle that we can build already. And then once we'll be on the market, we'll have a registry to capture, the data, and from that, also learn in a real world setting what the benefit is of our therapy, how well we can keep the benefits sustained over time, which is of course, of crucial importance for an implantable solution, is that you don't want, 6 or 12 months, down the road that efficacy slowly evaporates. That's not going to be acceptable.
Exactly. So you mentioned the physicians there, and I guess to date, there may be a different group that you're dealing with, but to date, it's been drugs, as you said, Botox or the inhibitors. How are you going to get these guys to be thinking, guys or girls, to be thinking implant and, somebody who's never put an implant before to, when they've got the prescription pad, no, I'll go down this route.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think there you have to be realistic. We are an amazing team, but we're a small team, and we're not going to be able to change the world overnight. That's really not realistic. And really, there we're not going to do missionary work in that sense. So what we really took care of is to make sure that we work already with physicians, both neurologists, headache specialists, as well as implanters, that are believers of neuromodulation, and in a specific neuromodulation of migraine. As I explained, we are not the ones who invented this for migraine. There were other people looking into this already quite some time ago. And it's really teaming up with those, early adopters, others that are believers in this type of therapy, that we will slowly build out that critical mass. But again, I think you have to be very realistic. Um, um, it's a novel market that will need to develop, and that is going to take time. It's very different from prescribing a pill, and so we will need to have our advocates, our physician advocates, really work together with us. They are the ones also that will have to convince their colleagues and the societies of, for this particular group of patients, have failed certain treatments, under these and these conditions, neuromodulation is a great solution. And here's the evidence, and here how you do it. And that's how we're going to build this up slowly over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard that. And I've heard patients actually can play a huge part once something is on the market as well.
Absolutely. I think, and that's not a new trend, but this is something that's been going on for, a decade or longer, that, patients become more powerful advocates, both in the clinic, but also towards the payer, to support when there are new therapies coming to market, that these, should that access should be provided. And indeed, those collaborations also with patient advocacy groups are going to be important. Yeah.
So you were successful recently, raising 60 million, and it sounds a lot of money, but I know it's not. It's never enough. It's
Never
always got
enough.
in
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah.
So what's coming next then for us in terms of like what you're planning next?
I mean, indeed, we raised our Series B back in 2025, $60 million US, and that money is really earmarked to conclude our clinical program in Europe, in the United States, all the way up to regulatory approval. So we'll get the treatment on market. That is really the focus of the company, is to execute, and making sure that we are hitting our milestones, and that we get this therapy in the hand of physicians and to patients as soon as possible. And it's a lot of money. It's also, as you know, these are expensive projects to run, but that's where the full focus of the company is today.
Okay, okay. And I know the company has been growing, and you're very proud of your culture. And as it grows, it gets bigger. How are you going about managing the culture as it gets bigger? And
Sure.
perhaps you're going to have different locations. It's something that many leaders task wrong word, but struggle with.
Yeah, it is a struggle, to be honest. Um, it's difficult, and I mean, the thing is, it's there's as you're the company grows, the team grows, but also the company goes through different life cycles, right? We started with very early R&D. Now we're, clinical stage company progressing towards a commercial stage company. So the nature of the company changes as well. And also, some of our values and behaviors as a result of that changed also over time. And this is perfectly okay, I think. I think some of the behaviors that are really powerful in those early stages when you are very exploratory, are becoming less important at a later stage when you have a strategy set, a course set, and it becomes, execution mode. Other things, however, you definitely want to keep. And this is also something that I personally find really important in the hiring process. And every individual that joins the company will have a conversation with me before we sign any contract. And what I'm always checking really is I'm not checking, the credentials, and if, somebody is good in their particular topic. That's, the hiring managers are doing that. But I really want to understand, what does this make, what does this person, what makes them tick? Why do they get out of bed in the morning? And I think that is really what I'm looking for, is that passion for our mission, for what we want to achieve. And I think if that resonates with the people that you bring on board, I think that is the most powerful thing that you can do.
Fantastic, fantastic. Um, and in terms of like people who've been on along the journey, how have they reacted to the change? Because this can sometimes be a challenge for individuals who prefer the exciting stage at the beginning, but as
Mm.
it's moving on, it's just not for them anymore.
Yeah.
How can you
No.
manage with those
Yeah.
individuals? How have those individuals managed?
Yeah. No, that's true. And again, I think it is a natural, as your, company progresses to different stages, that not everybody enjoys every stage, right? There's people that really enjoy that early stage phase, and there's people that actually hate it. And you kind of need to understand, I think, as an individual, what fits best with you. But also for me, in my capacity as a CEO, I think it's also important to kind of understand, who can play, which role at which stage the best. And that is difficult. And what you're seeing in practice, I think, is that there's people that can, move along from stage A to B to C. And there's others that, felt very happy in stage A and B. And then at a certain stage, well, the kind of things that are expected from me now, and we've had several of those conversations recently with people, is just not the right, combination for me anymore. And that's okay. That's okay from the perspective of the company, but that's also okay from the perspective of that, individual, because you can spend your time only once. So, better spend it on a job that you enjoy and that you're good at, and that fits with you. So I think, trying to be honest about that is important. And but it's difficult also. At least I find that not always an easy task to do, to be very transparent.
And I know you are. I was speaking to another leader actually who said one of the people who he'd had such an honest discussion with previously, many years afterwards, came back and said, "At the time, I totally disagreed with you, but it
Yeah,
was the best thing you could have done."
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so, in terms of the fundraising, I guess it's also affecting like who you surround yourself with and the advisors, etc. Um, you've been very fortunate so far in raising that money, but I think one of the things you and I've spoken about before is that the funding cycle, it's getting harder. It's getting harder to get that money in, and the cycle is out of step with the actual time to get to market and time to get the payback for the investors. How are
yeah.
you managing it, or how has that changed since you first came in the market?
Um, I mean, back in the day when we, that's what is it, 15 years ago when we started Sapiens, I think I felt actually in those days it was easier to get an early stage company funded and off the ground. I think it's harder now. If you look at, just the reality, the facts, the data, it's taking, I think, like 14 to 17 years from, initial idea to, commercial success in the market. And of course, there's always, opportunities or teams that move faster than that. There's some that move slower, but that's a very, very long time span. And over that time span, you need to be able to make that return for those investors. That I think that's close to impossible, especially from, the perspective for the early stages. And that couples also to the fact that, if you look most, it's strategic acquisitions, your typical exit, but those exits take place later and later. You need to be, commercially de-risk, reimbursement in place. So that becomes a very long trajectory. And I think that makes it especially challenging for any early stage company right now trying to raise of something, that's, promising in a preclinical phase or whatever, to get access to money to finance that. It's not easy.
And I guess there's no answers to that at the moment. But for those people out there, perhaps leaders who are further back in the journey, what advice would you give about the lessons you've learned over the years, perhaps the things you wouldn't do again, or what? Yeah, just
I mean, I think what has helped us, if I kind of, reflect back, because of course also we have been in a preclinical stage and even before that where we had the PowerPoint stage, if you like. I think is to demonstrate consistent de-risking of, the journey. What I mean with that is that um, any, credible investor that has an understanding of the field knows that there's technology risk, clinical risk, regulatory reimbursement, commercial risk. MedTech is hard. And I think as a CEO, as a founder, you need to acknowledge those risks and acknowledge that those are real and come with a clear plan how over time you're going to burn down the risks in those various domains. And I think if you can demonstrate that risk burn down consistently, that is what builds, credibility in that early phase as you're building towards getting, first clinical data in hand, which is of course a huge de-risker. But I think that would be my main, piece of advice, and try to do that on an as lean as possible budget. Yeah.
is there a role you find that people recruit too late traditionally?
Maybe not per se recruiting, but at least getting there's of course different ways to getting expertise into the company. Either you hire a senior leader, or you find a consultant, or a coach or whatever. But I think what I've seen with people that have less industry experience, let me put it like that, is that they would typically bring in, the reimbursement folks, the regulatory folks in too late. And as we discussed earlier, you need, as a founder, as a CEO, you don't need to understand all of the details, but you need to understand the landscape in which you are playing. And whether that's with a, with a hire or because also in the early stage, right, it's in the very early stage, at least, maybe you don't have sufficient, resources available to bring these folks on board, but, maybe in a fractional role or in any other, but you really need to understand it. And again, that comes also back to this risk burn down part. If you don't understand the game that you're playing, that's like a huge risk, right? And you will not be, no one is going to put their money into that.
Yeah, I've seen so many organizations where they've had to unpick, perhaps because they didn't take that decision early enough, and 2 years later they've had to go back.
Yeah.
So, next steps. What do we need to keep our eyes peeled for with you and the company
I mean,
that you could share?
yeah. There's all kinds of great stuff cooking, but no, the biggest thing right now for us is our clinical study program. We're building momentum in Europe. We have our IDE in, so the expectation obviously also is that we're moving forward into the US. So these are all very very exciting developments for us as a company, and that's really what keeps us busy day and night. We're starting or have actually recently started a small pilot study also in the Netherlands in an additional indication, cluster headache. We did not yet talk about that, but you know, same technology, same physician group, and for a very it's a small indication with a very high unmet need, and we're trying to move that forward as well. But the focus is migraine, and yeah, for the years to come, I'm hoping that we'll be able to demonstrate some strong data there.
So do I. And for anybody out there, because there will be people who've got migraines listening to you, what would you like to say to them?
Ah, that's always that's a difficult question.
Sorry.
Strangely enough, because obviously we don't want to overpromise, but I think what is
Yeah.
really important is that we have an understanding of the unmet need. We have a very clear understanding of that unmet need, and we are very focused and urgently working on a solution that can hopefully alleviate that need. I mean, it is an investigational therapy today. We still need to demonstrate the safety. We still need to demonstrate efficacy, but this is the path that we are on. And the company, my team, we are fully focused on achieving that.
How do you deal with all the knocks? I mean, I get it in my job, you get
Yeah.
it in your job, I guess investors get it in their jobs, and strategics get it in their jobs. But how do you deal with all the no's? Yeah.
Sometimes it's really hard, and uh, I'm honestly there's days when you feel devastated, and then you're like pulling your hair out, like what did I get myself into? What are we doing? And then you look at the other side and you understand why are we doing this. And I like to look back once in a while and remember those very first days. I mean, what were we thinking? Look at where we are today. We've come so far. We've and that's again that keeps you going. But there are speed bumps always. There are things that you did not anticipate, you maybe could not even anticipate, and that you have to deal with. And I think at least what for me really helps is to have um, a strong and experienced team around you. And the United before spoke like say CEO job can be lonely. It is lonely at times, but for the problems where it doesn't have to be lonely, make sure that you can that you involve your team and push through the issues.
Who do you talk to when it's getting difficult? Because we have talked about this before, but who do
Yeah.
you turn to?
Um, uh, Depending on the topic, my wife, she's a great mirror. um, Others that have gone through this journey, like your peers. Um, I if you haven't done this kind of stuff before, I think it's really difficult to understand what it's about. If you haven't been a CEO, haven't been in med, I think there are very particular challenges that come with the job, and there are very particular challenges that come with the type of industry. So there's some of my board members, some some peers, um, but it's a small group of people. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you use your board? Because I think perhaps a mistake a lot of early CEOs make is trying to distance the board from problems. How do you use the
Yeah.
board, and what do you know is the right time to call on the board and when not?
Yeah, that's actually that's a great question, and it's actually difficult, and I think we are definitely not perfect yet, but we've improved over the years. Um, um, One, boards don't like surprises. Two, boards don't like uh, a problem without a path forward. Options. You don't need the solution, but you need options. I think you have to be aware of that. I'm also a believer of uh, transparency. Um, not every detail obviously is important for your board, but there's like the big things well, this could be important. And um, you know be clear about the risks. You usually have a good feeling, understanding of the really big risks, and communicate regular about those with your board. If a big issue pops up, again, be transparent, but within the constraints I mentioned. Also understand what's the path forward, because you don't want your board to become nervous and not start thinking for you. You need to be in control. And to be honest, I really feel I'm still learning there. So there's room for improvement, I'm sure.
No, it's been lovely speaking with you, and I've learnt so much and enjoyed it. I really enjoy how transparent you always are.
Thanks, I appreciate that. It was really
Thanks.
nice discussing with you, Liz.
For those of us lucky enough not to know what having a migraine is really like, can you tell us what is it really like?
And that's the thing which I had actually not realized initially until you start, because you have, of course, this view, indeed, the headache, the nausea, the locking yourself out, but it's isolation, it's loneliness. It's also people saying that they are disappointed in their body. These are very young people. Some people, develop their migraines already in their teens or their 20s and get worse and worse over the years. And, severe migraine can prevent you from, completing your education or building a career. Or I've spoken to young women who said, well, I actually decided to not have a family because I really don't know how to take care of small kids, these migraines. We've had patients that were telling us that it's, migraine rules my life, because if I wake up with a migraine attack today, I know I have to cancel my meeting with friends, or I can't go to the party, or actually I'm afraid to go to the party because the next day will be horrible. Giving them something literally in their hand that they can use and that they also feel has a positive benefit, has a positive effect on their migraine, really gives them a sense of control. I remember also one of our patients from a Belgium study was actually, I had not expected that, but one of the things that she explained also to us was that it also gave her something to talk about and to explain to others. And again, that goes to the point of migraine is invisible. Their life became very small. And what they mean with that is that there's a lot of things that they don't do anymore. They don't dare to do, or they are unable to do. So the things that, you and I take for granted, or time with friends, with your kids, in your job, and the migraine steals from you. We had this open communication line with the FDA, and so we could really go in detail, discuss the testing protocols before you make any sketch, before you do anything. As a CEO, as a founder, you need to acknowledge those risks. There's days when you feel devastated. It's like, what did I get myself into? What are we doing?